Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Riley King, and welcome to this afternoon newscast of the Riley King Newscast, right here on the Riley King Network. Let's begin. We have a lot of news to get to this afternoon, so let's get started. First up, COVID-19 in New Hampshire. Update. Let's take a look. Here is your COVID-19 New Hampshire update. 137 number of people in New Hampshire who have tested positive for COVID-19. 480, 446 number of people worldwide who have tested positive. One number of deaths from COVID-19 in New Hampshire. 19 number of people hospitalized with COVID-19 in New Hampshire. And 1,046 number of deaths from COVID-19 in the United States. 0 cases in Coos, 22 cases in Grafton, 7 cases in Carroll, 8 cases in Belknap, 5 cases in Merrimack, 1 case in Sullivan, 1 case in Cheshire, 30 cases in Hillsborough, 56 cases in Rockingham, and 7 cases in Stratford. New cases each day in New Hampshire. As you can see on this graph here, in the purple, daily new positive COVID-19 cases. As you can see, it went down and then we got a spike that went way up. In the orange is new hospitalizations, and in the red are the deaths. Only 1 death in New Hampshire from COVID-19. Your common symptoms: fever, cough, and difficult breathing. How it spreads, and prevention tips. Live at 3 o'clock p.m., Sununu gives update on COVID-19. Governor to speak as unemployment claims soar. Governor Chris Sununu plans to hold a news conference Thursday to give updates on the COVID-19 situation in New Hampshire. Sununu will be speaking after a report from the Department of Labor was released, showing that nearly 3.3 million Americans filed new unemployment claims last week, quadrupling a record that was set in 1982. In New Hampshire, more than 21,800 people filed new claims, up from 642 the week before. The claims were filed as the state opened up eligibility for unemployment to help people who are losing income because businesses have closed to slow the spread of the virus. As of Wednesday, 137 people in New Hampshire have tested positive for the coronavirus, and 19 people have been hospitalized. 1 person has died. New Hampshire colleges postpone commencement ceremony. College officials push back ceremony out of the concern over COVID-19. Let's take a listen to that video from WMUR News 9, Jamie Stayston.
Not even in the summer is UNH usually this empty, and now it may be even longer before seniors are seen roaming around campus. Graduation ceremonies set for May 16th have been postponed. The president making this announcement to students. We heard loud and clear from our graduates and their families that they want a ceremony, even if it is postponed, and they want it to be in person. In response, we are canceling honors convocation and postponing commencement to a future date.
I actually heard the news yesterday from LinkedIn. The president shared a video.
Graduate students Eric McNeely and Samantha Roberts say they were both looking forward to their hooding ceremonies at graduation this spring.
I just don't see how that's really viable, depending on when the timeline is for stuff like simmering down. Because if undergrads are back on campus, they can't really have a full graduation. So I don't know how that's going to work.
I was a little disappointed. I do understand, though, where it's coming from, just because this is so serious. So hopefully that our hooding ceremony is able to get pushed back, so at least the 23 of us are able to have what we've worked towards this whole year.
And 2 other college graduations in New Hampshire are still on at this point. Dartmouth College, set for June 14th. Officials at Granite State College are meeting to discuss their options. In Durham, Jamie Staten, WMUR News 9.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. Seven coronavirus cases linked to senior housing facility in Revere. Let's take a listen to that video from WCVB Boston. Okay, it looks like we're having a little technical difficulties with that video, as you can see. Seven cases of coronavirus in Revere are linked to a single senior living community, city officials announced Thursday. Of the 7 cases linked to the Jack Setter House, 5 patients are hospitalized and 1 has died, although the cases of deaths have not been confirmed, according to the mayor's office. The mayor and Jack Setter House officials are expected to speak about the situation at approximately 1:30. WCVB will stream the video as soon as possible. The Jack Setter House, which is located along Revere Beach Boulevard, is operated by Herbert Senior Life. Revere has a total of 33 positive cases as of Thursday morning, officials said. The Revere Board of Health has directed the Jack Setter House to quarantine all residents within their individual units. The mayor declared a state of emergency in the city because of the pandemic on March 19th. City buildings, parks, and playgrounds are closed to the public. Additional information about the city response in Revere is available by calling 311 or emailing revere311@revere.org or subscribing to notifications at revere.org/coronavirus. Coronavirus cases in Maine jumped to 155. First evidence of community transmission in York County. 16 people have now recovered from the virus. Dow rallies 800 points, lifting its 3-day gains to nearly 20%. Stocks surge for a third straight day Thursday as investors shrugged off the release of the record-breaking internal jobless claims, while the Senate passed a massive economic settlement bill aimed at the coronavirus outbreak. Unemployment report shatters record with 3.28 million Americans filing claims. Let's take a listen to that video from ABC News and Good Morning America.
For our viewers in the West, the weekly unemployment numbers are in, and they are the biggest ever by far. Nearly 3.3 million people out of work. Our chief economic correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis, is tracking the latest. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, George. And that's right. The numbers are unprecedented. 3,283,000 Americans filed for unemployment last week. That means more than 3 million Americans were laid off in just 1 week alone. And that is the equivalent of the entire city of Chicago. If every man, woman, and child was laid off from work in the city of Chicago in a single week, that is the equivalent, George, of what we're seeing reflected in these numbers. The most optimistic takeaway that you can glean from all of this is that America is following the rules. These shutdowns are working. People are staying from home. Businesses are shutting their doors. But of course, there is that economic fallout and the fears for many Americans about where that next paycheck will come from.
Which is exactly why the Senate has passed this massive economic bailout plan so quickly.
A giant bailout, $2 trillion, the largest ever, and the need across America right now is urgent. Overnight on Capitol Hill, a unanimous vote in the Senate.
The bill is passed.
A $2 trillion stimulus package, including $250 billion in checks going directly to families struggling under the weight of soaring layoffs and statewide lockdowns.
It's honestly been a disaster. Both of us have lost our jobs.
2 weeks ago, Jamie Gable was a physician's assistant. His wife, Christina, a hairdresser in New York. They were gainfully employed before both their jobs vanished.
Now we're scrambling to figure out how we can pay our bills.
We have 2 children, one with an adult with a mental disability. He has autism, and just what's happening for him is all of his programs shut down.
And it's happening across the country.
How am I going to make rent? How, bills, student loans.
Just the 9 days before this shutdown happened, we made about $32,000. That's kind of our norm in that stretch. To zero.
Are we going to be able to afford to buy food? Are we going to be able to pay our rent at the end of the month?
Amidst the uncertainty, 2 of the top trending questions on Google: who will get that stimulus money and when? Those making $75,000 or less will receive $1,200. Married couples who make up to $150,000 getting $2,400 and $500 for each child. Those checks heading out as early as April 6th. If you filed your taxes electronically, the stimulus payout will likely get to you faster via direct deposit. And while those unemployment figures today are absolutely staggering, analysts believe that the numbers are very likely higher. The number of layoffs last week are very likely higher because there were some issues with people going through websites and applying for unemployment insurance, and not everybody who lost a job applied immediately. George, we will very likely see these numbers continue to climb.
Okay, Rebecca, thanks very much. Let's get a view from the White House now. Our chief national correspondent, Terry Moran, in Washington. Terry, the Treasury Secretary already out responding to these numbers, basically shrugging them off.
Well, he's trying to put a best spin on a very dark situation. He says these are not relevant numbers. Don't panic because this stimulus is coming through. That massive stimulus, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says, will take care of that. He also notes that in some businesses, they're going to be hiring a lot. Think of all the things that are needed right now, from protective gear to hand sanitizer. Those businesses will be hiring. We have not heard from the president directly. Right now, George, like a lot of presidents, he likes to bring the good news. But there's no question that these staggering numbers which are just probably the beginning of the bad news, are going to confirm this president in his determination to go forward and try to open up the country. He talks about it. He's talking about it in slightly more measured terms now, but he is determined to do so. The problem, George, what's the plan? Other countries have talked about a controlled infection regime, keeping older people, vulnerable people isolated, allowing younger people perhaps in different sections of the country to go back to work. The problem is, as we know, this disease does strike younger people, and a very few of them get very sick and die.
And we heard from Dr. Fauci last night, who reminded everyone, we don't set the timeline, the president doesn't set the timeline, the virus sets the timeline.
You know, this is a president who is obviously frustrated, even angry. At times it almost seems he takes it personally, talking about when he was told the country would shut down. He says, how can that be? That just can't be. He is a man who has lived his life as a kind of master of the universe. And here he is, George, encountering a moment when the universe is declining to be mastered. But once again, as a businessman and as the president of a country which is in economic freefall, he is determined to go forward, find some way to open up, perhaps with the advice of the public health advisors that he's got, perhaps beyond them.
And we expect, okay, Terry Moran, thanks very much. We expect to hear from the president later today. He's been doing these daily press conferences with the White House Coronavirus Task Force. But again, the big news right now, this morning, weekly unemployment claims are in. Nearly 3.3 million people out of work in the last week. That number is likely to climb next week.
Well, hey there.
Okay, and there you go on that video and that report. And that does it for this afternoon broadcast of the Riley King Newscast right here on the Riley King Network. I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon. I'll see you back here later on today for another newscast. And I'll have a news report coming up in a little bit. Goodbye, everyone.